AI did not break education. Let's just be clear with that, right? What AI is doing is exposing the cracks that we already have had for centuries, right? Welcome back to Generation AI, where we demystify artificial intelligence, AI, and how it reshapes our life and work. I'm JC Bonilla, CEO and head of AI Element 451.
Hey, everybody. I'm JC's
co-pilot
here, Ardis Kadiu, founder and CEO of Element 451. Today's episode, we're gonna we did a little bit of a different intro, and we have a special guest with us today. But today's episode is really a deep dive on one of the most kind of urgent questions that are facing educators, parents, and even technologists. And as a parent myself, I've been kind of struggling with this lately. What is AI actually doing to learning, to teaching and learning, or to student learning? And today's is about the shift that's already underway. AI isn't necessarily it's not necessarily the future of education. It's the present, right? It's happening right now, and we're seeing a lot of these artifacts and a lot of articles happening from the classroom to campuses to corporate training. We're really seeing a huge measurable shifts in how we teach and learn and even work. And in the classroom, this is becoming more and more irrelevant. So that's kind of what we're going to focus today.
Well, not only the intro is slightly different, we also have a variation on how the content is going to flow. I'm very excited to be welcoming Michael McGetrick. Mike is joining us today as a friend, expert, and someone who it's in the epicenter, like us, Ardis and I, on all things education. Mike, principal at Spark 451, veteran educator, creative technologist. And one of the things that caught our eye, not only you speak about this as an expert, but you just wrapped up a course. And one of the learnings and conversations we're going to be having here is what I call syllabus of one. So Mike, your experience and how you introduce AI in the content and your pedagogy, but also having the conversation on how to generalize it. So syllables of many, right? And then I'd like to welcome you, and so happy to have you here, Mike.
Wait. I also want to, we didn't introduce him as Master Scout or Master Eagle Scout. What was the title, Mike?
I'm an assistant scout master.
Mike, welcome to the show. Let's start with a bit of background setup. And I think that's an important disclosure as we have this conversation. Us three, we're the products of education, and we're having a conversation about education, right? Education is core to our lives. We all taught or teach. In work, we're in the epicenter of education. In a way, work and education are the same thing for us. But outside the classroom experience and inside the classroom experience, we have been joined by really interesting backgrounds. Ardis, Mike, I believe you have a beautiful urban experience that dabble with multiple responsibilities as you did your undergraduate. I had a more traditional campus immersion. And us three, we were joined in grad school. We became friends, but we understand the power of education, the power of socialization, but also the power of not so great teaching, right? And we've been in that ecosystem in and out. And in a way, all these experiences shape the conversation we're going to have. So in terms of disclosure of biases or where you come from, it's a really important thing. With that, let's start with you, Mr. McGetrick. So you told us that you have had a really interesting experience in a course at Brooklyn College where you teach. And I'm assuming a lot of Mid-Journey, ChatGPT, creative design thinking is part of what you do. So let's start with you. What's happening in your course and how is AI meeting your teaching style, my friend?
Well, thanks so much, JC. And first of all, let me say thanks. I'm super excited to be here. Not only are we friends, and we've been friends for a long time, but I've also become a fan of your guys with this podcast, and I'm an avid listener.
Yes, we have a groupie, Ardis. We have a groupie.
I like to listen to the podcast on my way home from work and way to work to keep me caught up on the latest models and the latest releases. So thank you guys for doing this. I think it's really important for the community that you're putting this together.
There you go. Thanks, Mike. Means a lot.
We're not in the classroom, but we're educating. Always educating.
Absolutely. So let me talk a little bit about the course. I just finished teaching, and last night we had our final presentations, which were super exciting by our students. I've taught at Brooklyn College as an adjunct lecturer for the last 20 years or so. I took a little break for a couple of years to coach my son's basketball teams. But now I'm back in the fray. Actually, they approached me in the spring of last year, and they said, "Look, in our digital design program where you've taught, we really need a course on generative AI. It's obviously becoming really important for visual art and content creation design, and you're the guy we want to do it, to design it for us." So that was, first of all, a very exciting opportunity to put together a curriculum from scratch. And so, it's something you think about deeply and say, okay, well, what is this assignment, and what's going to be the best path forward for putting this together? Is it tool usage? Is it foundational thinking? Is it just getting work done faster? Is it combining traditional techniques with artificial intelligence, content generation, generative AI? And the answer is it's all the above, right? That's the conclusion you have to come to.
Of course, you gotta feel, of course, right?
And so, the way I approached it is to say I need to make sure that I am building a foundation of knowledge and principles for design that have been passed down for generations, and make sure those are being taught. So build that theory of design principles like composition and balance, emphasis, rhythm, unity, contrast, and allowing the students to apply those design principles using generative AI tools. And for me, it was an amazing experience, and for the students as well. Just I had a lot of traditional art students. I had a lot of students from other disciplines who were excited to see this in the course catalog and registered for it. And so, ultimately, in the end, we had some great outputs from it.
So, Mike, one of the things that you mentioned is like you have the principles and then how you apply those. Would it be, from kind of my experiences, working on the design world and kind of what we're doing right now with AI, there's just the idea of creating a lot of things really, really fast and experimenting and having a lot of outputs. I feel like that's really a huge unlock. So rather than you spending, the whole semester producing one artifact, now you can kind of put out many artifacts. Like what's been the unlock for your students, like the traditional way versus kind of the way with AI? Like what's been the change?
So that's a great point. And one of definitely the things that we uncovered was that we can teach principles week after week and see them immediately apply. So in the past, I might teach a few foundational principles in a lecture and some exercises, and I'd give the students a week to come up with a project. And what we're doing instead is we're introducing those principles, for example, composition, balance, rule of thirds for a layout. And we're seeing those applied immediately within 2 to 5 minutes and in multiple iterations. So, something that would have taken them, a week to build a project out of now takes minutes. So, you start to say, okay, well, am I doing my job as an educator when it takes 5 minutes for them to apply the principle? All right. There's a quote that I really love by Herbert Simon, who's a Nobel Prize winner, who's had a lot of foundational impact on education and psychology. And this quote says, "Learning results from what the student does and thinks, and only from what the student does and thinks." Meaning that, what the teacher says has less impact on learning than what the student actually does and thinks in their mind. Are they forming a mental model of what this is all about? So that's what you try to design with a course that uses generative AI to say, okay, these are foundational principles. This is how they've worked in the past. These are the rules, and let's think about them for a moment and show some examples, reflect on those, and now let's see them in action. And the doing becomes the prompt. The doing becomes the refinement of the prompt. And the inputs of the prompt, like, how do I help them think about it a little further, artists? and this is something that you and I have talked about. Now, I think you've used the term data features when defining elements that go into a data model, a predictive model. And so I started thinking about it that way in my artist mind meld to say, how can I translate these principles into data features that can be used in prompts? So lighting is a data feature, camera angle, colors, mood, style, historical style. And I start to introduce the students that way to think about them as like what would be layers of visual information and now become sort of data layers in your prompt.
Yeah, and that's really how these models think too, right, Mike? Is it's like they call them concepts, and we've talked about that in this podcast before, where starting to think about like what is the world of these models and like putting concepts together. So the idea of like how can you trigger the right concepts and kind of guide it on the right concepts, and so the person on the other side or that student really becomes more of a kind of a curator and says, hey, I have a vibe of what this needs to look like. The lighting needs to be this way or that way. And it's like waves the wand and they don't really have to do the craftsmanship part goes out of the window now. They're just creating the idea. We can talk about this all day in terms of like visual design and like teaching and how that can work. But JC, we need to move on, right? Keep us on track here.
Yes, you two are going to be fun to have. Too many stories of art. And by the way, Ardis and Mike have an artistic background, creative background. So sometimes they nerd out there. So hopefully that'll come out. So a question that Ardis brought to you, Mike, and I'd like to use that thinking to move us to this next section, right? Is this idea of the time to value from pedagogy, aka the assessment, right? And all of a sudden we start thinking about, my gosh, I can have my students do not a project a week, but 11 projects a day and then have this repertoire change. We heard from this really early on from one of our AI thinkers, and we love the work that Ethan Mollick does, but it was called the homework apocalypse, right? Pedagogy, in the terms of I teach you this and I assess it, right, is kind of the balance between how a curriculum is designed and syllabus, and 50% of the grade is given to a final or whatever, right? Now what we see is that through the introduction of AI, it puts a lot of stress on how do I think about a paper? How do I grade a paper? How do I start thinking about the effort of doing coding, right, as the one project versus the coding that you can do in 30 seconds, right, and multiple iterations like that. Taking this to the next level, we saw a viral article going out in our community from New York Magazine calling cheating your way via AI. Specifically in this article, grounding the story on a school dropout, more like spelled out, from Columbia University, where he basically went viral on his social media indicating two things. I basically cheated my way through college. 80% of the work that I've done was all AI generated. Number two, he cheated on his, he used the word cheating, right? He cheated on his interviews and tried to land at least one interview from the big four. Think about coding and whatnot. And the premise is it cheating because I need to produce something, or is it taking advantage of the tools today to generate that, right? And it's a really interesting divide because it puts all of us at odds. Are these things creating loopholes in the process, or do we just need to use these loopholes to rethink the process? And Mike, you already a survey of one, but I think this is a really interesting dilemma. Ardis, you also read the article. Actually, you shared it. What was your takeaway on this article as we think about fighting the tide or swimming against the tide when all things education?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting article, right? It basically goes into the name of the article is Everyone is Cheating Their Way Through College. And, it goes into details of how students are basically using ChatGPT for everything. They're using it. There was one example where a student actually used to, the professor asked, in a couple of sentences, introduce yourself and say something or what are you trying to get out of this course. And the student actually put that into ChatGPT, introduce yourself and try to see what you can get out of this course. So we're, there's this dilemma or the dichotomy, right? It's like we're looking at AI on the creative fields, and Mike is using it in different ways in the classroom. to get more and to get better and to get better output, something that would have taken, let's say, 5 classes to go through iterations and craftsmanship and get these outcomes, you now can get into a lot more tighter. And then there's other use cases that people are showcasing as like, well, we're just bypassing the critical thinking, or we're bypassing like the work that somebody has to do in order to get the outcome out of the class. That's writing, that's critical thinking, that's paper writing, and so on and so forth. So you have both of those two different worlds, but essentially where we are today is the cat is out of the bag already, and the article just says every student is using this, and really the traditional like professors or the curriculum that's based on papers and that's based on this traditional way of evaluating students, it's out of the window. Like professors are just giving up, right? So something has to give and something needs to change. And that's really what the paper is all about, is basically kind of surfacing and saying, look, everyone who is in who was in college today, they literally grew up with ChatGPT and they don't know any better. So it's like you have to cater to them. Otherwise, we'll talk about this a little bit later in some discussion, but how do you become useful, or how do you make them successful in college, right? How do you give them the skills that they need?
The biggest departure, I say, from today's thinking, right? And if you go back just 2 years ago, it was the detection dilemma. How do I use technology and AI to detect that it was AI generated? And I think that's just
the cheating part.
That's
basically out of the window.
That's out of the window. I think that if educators, anyone who starts to think that way, they really are fighting the tide, right? So. But then it puts us into the redefinition of learning, right? So, Mike, question for you. I don't know if you were in this school of thought, given that you are only a young pup, but the people that you trained, right? They probably created they're not drawing creative, right? So, but if we go back to like circa 1950s and 40s, like, drafting was something that was pen and paper, right? And if you rule of thirds or composition, then you probably needed to do those things. So circa 1990s, introduction of technology and creative. So all of a sudden, like, you teach that way. Circa 2025, then you teach with this, redefinition of the way to produce and be creative, aka AI. So for me, that's just rethinking all learning, right? So, but the outcomes, the whole process changes. So isn't that where we are today? Like, what's your take on this?
So, a couple of quick takes are that, NYU has defined some rules about AI in education. And Clay Shirky is their vice provost for AI in education, who's, a thought leader on all this stuff. I teach a few courses there, and their position is that seeding is not the biggest danger of AI in education, but rather learning loss is the biggest danger. And so how do you prevent that? Like, so for them, blanket bans on all uses and assignments are just ineffective. So what their position is rather that the faculty should make the decision on defining the usage of AI, either completely banning it at their own peril, perhaps, or defining how it can be used on which particular assignments you can use it for. For me, I really think that, in order to properly apply AI and generative AI, you need to have some visual literacy and understanding.
Those are the basics. That's going back to pen and paper. Is that what you mean?
Yes. At least have the literacy of it, right? To have an appreciation of what is good. And so, that it may drive us back to re-embracing of humanities and the liberal arts as foundations. However, that manifests itself in the AI world, but having an understanding of what has come before you in order to understand that output and appreciate it and have some perspective that this is the right answer. And because I tell my students, you own the output. You own the output of this. And if you present it to me and it's wrong, or it's something wildly different from what the assignment was, and you said, "Oh, well, that's what the AI gave me." That's your mistake because you have to own the output of it. And so, in order to be a good owner of output, whether as a student or a professional, you have to know what is good and what is the right output.
Mike, you're talking about outcomes, right? And I want to take us back to a faculty member that has shaped us all, and she's been a high influence. And Lord Fayard, hello. I think she's in Portugal at the moment. I don't care how long it takes you to do it. I'm going to grade you on the quality, not on the effort. So the outcome, it's on getting it right, right? The quality aspect. And we're talking about a paper, and then, someone made a 3,000 page paper, and it took them 5 million years to produce it, right? And then it was not good. That's the effort, right? Now, the quality is that someone in 5 pages can have a much more meaningful output. They own it, to your point. And all of a sudden, they get a better grade, right? So there's this aspect of redefining learning through outcomes. But also what I wanted to tease out here is the grind. A lot of academic learning expectations that you have to grind it. So I need you to go through it, and it has to be a 50-page paper. I mean, that notion of the grind and the mental aspect of teaching, I find really interesting. I personally, on my teaching, I have moved away from the grind, but I have to tell you, reacting to your point, the basics, the appreciation of the work, sometimes I've designed things, and I don't care whether it's AI or not, because I want to also teach as part of the outcome, the process of getting it wrong or the grind and whatnot. So wondering if you artists and can go back to a bit of the refining learning, but there's the aspect of the pressure, the balance between mental health and, the grind that goes in education. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, look, we have to separate the two, right? Because right now we're talking about how do our brains grow, and there's friction there. So you gotta battle against the problem, and if there's no friction, if the problem is not hard, or your brain is not stretching and it doesn't know the answer, so it's kind of think through it. That's kind of how it grows, right? That's how you learn new things. Like, you don't learn new things by memorization, rogue memorization. We know that that's not the way that we learn, and that's how we think. So rogue memorization doesn't work, but you have to reason through problems. You have to have hard problems and grow and grow and grow harder and harder. So that's one part of it, and we know that that's how we do it. So when you get the answer right away, there is no work that's been done in between. It means that there is no growth, there is no learning happening there. And what Mike's is talking about, or what we talk about, education and learning, is how do we evaluate the student that they're actually doing that growth, that there is growth in between there, and how do we make sure that they're growing? But what you mentioned around mental health, education hasn't really changed in a really long time. It's it's been, the pedagogy and the way that people are taught it's been the same, right? There's hey, there's a corpus of information, you got to learn it, you got to go through it. There is, exercises, there's things that you need to do, and you got to go through that. But the personalization part and how people learn, I'm not saying that there's different modes of learning, right? But how you struggle through things, and how you have coaching and how you have help, that part of it has not changed, right? It's you're kind of left to your own devices to do that struggling on your own. What's happening now is that you have mental health, and you're talking about mental health. It's really all the other inputs that are part of it, right? It's all the social media, and it's all the world has gotten even more complex and very, very confusing, and there's a lot of stimulants that are coming in. So our brains are not meant to do that, right? So it's how do you reason about all these different things? Of course, you have one of the most anxious generations right now, which you talk the whatever you want to call it. You have more kids on and more even young adults on kind of ADHD medication than ever, and this ability to how do you hone your brain so it's not overstimulated, and you call that the anxious generation. So that's where you're talking about the mental health part. But looking, separating that from education, those are a little bit different, and I don't know if we're really prepared to talk about how that kind of fits in. But yes, the stresses are going to come in, and we're going to take shortcuts, just like everybody does. We human take shortcuts. So this is no, that's the part perhaps we should raise. It's Are shortcuts driven by where we are today as a society with all these different like short attention spans and everything, or are shortcuts a technology that is being introduced and it's part of the technology and it's technology's fault necessarily that people are doing shortcuts?
But that's the point. And before we go to Mike, your point is well taken. But the shortcut, right, could be a construct for your cheating, right? So in a way of the grind, the mental healthness aspect that I was trying to bring up is that the what is the outcome, but higher education also has a very, very rooted passion towards the how. Right. And this is where if you sometimes don't follow the how, so it feels like you're taking a shortcut, and the shortcut can be labeled in the group of cheating or not. Mike, what do you say about this?
So, we talk about students who may have spent 12 hours on an assignment now spending 1 hour on it. And so we start to ask ourselves, okay, well then what are they doing with that 11 hours now? How are they just
Exactly.
Are they scrolling through
Yep.
TikTok? Are they, scrolling through memes and vegging out, or are they doing something that's going to mentally engage them and bring them sort of that dopamine induced learning moment that we've all had where we've read a great book or solved a problem on our own, that we've all had that great learning experience. And I just worry that those opportunities are being replaced by mindless scrolling on social media. And so we may need to make sure that our students are, if they're going to be spending less time on assignments because of generative AI, are they using that new spare time in a constructive way?
Yeah. JC, one thing I want to wrap this up with is go like we can move on to the next kind of segment here. But part of that article was that the student who got kicked out and cheated its way through Columbia, you know what his outcome was or his goal?
To get a job?
No.
To prove that you can cheat?
No.
Okay, then I just failed the test.
The reason why he went to Columbia? You did. That's right. So the reason why he went to Columbia is because the best way to set up your life is to marry someone, to find a wife. He went to Columbia to find a wife, and to have a network of friends that he can, powerful people that he can have a network now. So essentially, like he achieved those things. Like if that's your only reason to go to an Ivy League school, to basically find someone who's really, really smart to start a family with, and then to have a network of friends that are potentially going to be successful in the future, and now you're going to be part of that. Like that is a not bad thinking. So it's like all the other things that you have to do, like the learning and the tests and all that stuff. It's like, hey, we're going to take shortcuts in order to kind of get through that, right? So the part that I want to kind of end it with, it's like it's not a cheating crisis, I would say right now. It's like it's a relevance crisis, right? And AI didn't really break the system. It just really exposed how outdated it already was. And now in modern world, like how do you think about skills? How do you think about outcomes? How do you think about trajectories and how we fit into the society? Education and higher education specifically really needs to adopt to kind of to match those.
Yeah, and the holistic education, right? So what I get in the classroom and the outside the classroom experience, super important. Let's stay on the in-classroom experience, right? And I think that a really interesting data conversation that we can have, it comes from a study that was just recently published that is looking at 51 studies on the effect of ChatGPT and learning. Never mind how it helps me find my partner, get drunk for the first time, or all the incredible things that we built as humans around our educational experience, which are valid, right? So before we go to the data, I just want you to know that this is not an AI component, and this shift has not been an AI component. The first time I heard it was in 1995 when Dr. Leo Setian taught us in freshman engineering class. A students become professors, and the C student becomes the CEO and the boss of the B student, right? Alluding to the aspect of learning and then social skills and all those kind of things. But back to learning, back to the in-class experience. I know, Dr. Leo Setian, in heavens, love you.
What kind of student were you, JC?
I was an A student.
You're an A student.
I was
It
an A
figures you're a
student.
Professor Bonilla.
Yeah, I know, but I do over index on hands gestures and jazz hands. So I don't know, maybe there's a bit of both. Either way, learning performance, learning perception, higher order thinking. Think about these three things: learning performance, learning perception, and higher ordering things. And we're gonna have this conversation about how studies, if you do a control experiment, is you do your thing through traditional learning methods, or it's enhanced, supported, done via ChatGPT. So the first study on learning performance, a very, very big effect. When you look at these studies, the effect means that if your outcomes are way higher, right? You look at the dependency of the intervention, in this case, learning via ChatGPT, and it was probably the largest effect, specifically seen on skill-based training and problem-based learning. But here's a caveat. The students that actually had better results in learning performance needed 4 to 8 weeks to drop that, to achieve those gains. And specifically on skills-based learning. So how do I gain a skill of writing better, or doing a code, or problem solve? How do I solve this mathematics hypotenuse problem, and things of that sort. Reactions to this first prompt on learning, what do you guys think and walk away as we talk about learning performance and knowing that in the effect of 4 to 8 weeks, learnings did better if you're skill-based or problem-based? Does that ring a bell in your personal lives as well?
So this is maybe I can. So I guess what we're saying here is that, again, this study is a meta study, meaning like it's looked at 51 different studies across K-12, higher education, and then trying to categorize these, groups and saying, okay, how does ChatGPT affect, learning performance, learning perception, and so on and so forth. And if we're focusing on learning performance, which is skill-based, meaning how do I do X, or how do I learn something like this, or problem-based, how do I solve this problem? You have to use ChatGPT for 4 to 8 weeks. And there's a huge benefit to that. Like the performance is increased drastically by using ChatGPT. It makes a lot of sense because when you think about in context learning and when you think about personalization, you need to know, like, ChatGPT breaks it down for you and kind of explains how the certain problems get solved. And if it's a math problem or if it's, an English problem, like, you're not just getting an output, you're basically saying, how do I solve this? And it's going through that in a easy way. The way that we use it, you think about, like, explain this concept to me as a 5th grader or as an 8th grader or as X, right? And I see a lot of those prompts being used. Even my kids sometimes or whatever, like if we need to show something, like you can explain a concept in a level that perhaps you don't have access to that teacher in order to do that. So now this is kind of an introduction to personalized learning, to explaining concepts. And I can totally see how that can be very useful and improve that performance. Mike, what do you think? Like, are you using stuff like that? For example, it's like, hey, how do I explain this concept? For example, like I have a difficult time, like in terms of how do I position something in order to have analogies or whatever. Like those are, I don't know, like I use it that way, but how about you?
Well, I mean, first of all, for students actually performing and delivering on exams and assignments, certainly the intervention of tools like ChatGPT makes perfect sense that they would improve, right? Like the ability to have that one-on-one tutor, have difficult concepts explained to you in a level that you're going to understand. It makes perfect sense. And, I see it just like you, Ardis. I see it with my kids. I see it with my students. And it, the writing becomes very good. And I just hope that they are, doing, I ask them to say, please, if you're going to use ChatGPT in your writing for assignments, please use your own thoughts. And if it's a paragraph or two, please write it on your own. Please don't use ChatGPT. You should be able to construct a paragraph on your own. And so I'm straddling the line here, guys, on being going back to tradition and allowing the use of the tools. But I encourage them, when possible, to use their own language.
Cat is out of the bag, Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, cows at the back. That's true. But with artist example, there's two things that we're blending, right? Performance is I need you to know how to compute an average or the standard deviation, or I need you to know how to use this, right? And then there's a direct effect and a large effect when you spend the time and use for skill based. This is the thing that I want to go before I go into perception, because artists brought perception, the idea of concepts. In concepts, the effect is moderate. So, sometimes I need you to teach a very interesting concept and I get inspired, the analogies, all that kind of stuff. There's an effect, but it's moderate. Here's a caveat. Either on perception is more than 8 weeks. For performance is reported 4 to 8 weeks. You know what a typical semester course is in a, traditional higher education? It's 15 weeks. So it's a really interesting thing that half of the course need to be designed to grab this AI muscle and make sure that it works, so that the second half of the course actually it's plug and play, right? I find that to be very interesting because it's an investment of time. And this is the part that many of us, I think, skip through. Like, here's AI, go for it. And then a week later, we want the results. But, it takes time to prompt to perfection. And then you go back at it and creating your workspaces and whatnot. Now, here's the interesting one, higher order thinking. This is the part that half of, I would say, critics and challengers on, fighting the tide will say that it's making you lazy, it does the work for you, you're not developing this, high level thinking, but the effect is moderate. In other words, when seen, the research shows, in STEM type of educations, right, and AI comes as a tutor, there's a moderate effect that the students do better, right, in this type of abstract high level thinking, which in my opinion is probably one of the best things that liberal arts programs or overall higher education brings. Reactions on these as we can move on. So perception, performance, and higher order thinking. How do you guys want to wrap up this section? Ardis?
Look, the moderate improvement, there's really nothing in here that basically says you can take it or leave it, but it really, ChatGPT, if we think about this, you have to use it the right way, right? So that's the part where there's a lot of pieces that are missing, and it works best when you use it as a coach and not necessarily like just giving you the answers. And that's the part where, a lot of these studies as techniques and prompting techniques and the ability to use AI has evolved and these models have evolved. It's in these studies specifically, right? So they're probably using older models or the techniques for how do you use, kind of this coaching approach. It's not there. So I'm going to leave this one and say the jury is still out on it if it's, improves your higher order thinking. But I know from a personal experience that with the new O3 model, which is a thinking model, I use it every single time I need to think through a problem. I provide my concept, I provide my context, and I use it as a thinking partner. Essentially, hey, help me think through this, and that's perhaps one of the best uses. But that model has only been around for a couple of months, so obviously not part of the study. But as AI is evolving and these models become better and better at being that coach, so to speak, we're probably going to see, higher impact on learning on this part.
Yeah. Look, for higher order thinking, there's scaffolding that is needed, and one of the funny memes that it's coming out in higher order thinking is that the Socratic mind, it's needed, and in this case, like the hottest thing in AI pedagogy in the last 2,000 years is that Socrates is having a moment, right? Again, right? So it's coming again, and I think this idea of looking at AI as not a calculator but as a tutor, it's important in learning to that.
So just jumping on to Ardis's thoughts on how he uses ChatGPT and other sources for helping him think through a problem. A brain uses our synapses to, connect information and knowledge that we have. And, knowledge is not something that's lacking in Ardis's brain. So he's got a lot of connections that he can make already. And I worry about our younger students who have gone through this, past couple of years using ChatGPT through all their assignments and, not building up a store of knowledge that can help, connect thoughts together that, will allow the knowledge to grow and generate that higher order thinking, right? So that is, brings us to just, helping them to understand their own learning process. And there's going to come a point where we're going to have to teach students about the learning process and make sure that they're not cheating themselves and that there's a certain amount of effort that's going to go into it, and make sure that if they're going to go through a 4-year college and have the coming of age experience, that it truly is one of coming of age, and that they're not cheating themselves for using these tools. And that's my greatest fear. And I'm sure we'll deal with it as time goes by.
Mike, let me pivot from what you're just saying, right, to the manifestation of education today in AI and how it's creating this stress, right, in the learning pedagogy and systems, and how it translates to the workplace. So, recap. Sure, a lot of us approach education for multiple reasons, right, and multiple benefits, social, economic, and whatnot. But the aspect of work. So I'm going to come to higher education because the saying is, if you land into a good school, you're going to be okay. You're going to find a good job. We know AI is taking a lot of entry-level jobs. And if anything, right now, we start seeing these younger professionals probably struggle with that mindset. Here's my question to us as we start talking about this last section. And I think, Ardis, you have a really interesting article on Reid Hoffman that probably you can sprinkle some of your thinking here. But I am a 21-year-old new professional. I have a job. I'm going to be coached by someone who is 55, a boss, and he, let's say it's JC Bonilla, right, doesn't know much about AI. And all those, like, I've been trained with this AI heavy front, like in a good educational program, right? I am AI ready and I have high level thinking, like, this has worked, but at the same time, my receiving aid, my coach is not there. So I find that really interesting that in the workplace, it's AI upskilling, right? Or outskilling some people, and we're going to go through also that shift there. So just a quick conversation around what's your thinking as it relates to education, meeting the workforce, and all things learning and development. Ardis, you want to take a stab at this?
Yeah. Well, I guarantee you this, that the workforce of today, even today, like there's you're seeing from a lot of CEOs, and you're seeing from you saw the letter from the Shopify CEO, and you saw a lot of different CEOs
a lot
kind of putting
intent, right?
Their own right. So basically what they're saying is that, hey, if you're not going to use AI in your job today, then we might not have a place for you here. So we're moving the organization to everybody trying to use AI as part of their jobs. We need to streamline things. AI becomes a central point. If like you can't have headcount or, expansion if you didn't try to use AI to kind of accomplish that tasks. You saw big changes and workforce reductions from Microsoft and a lot of other companies over the last couple of weeks. So what's happening is that AI is becoming a pivotal kind of component of your skill set that you need in order to accomplish jobs. So students who are who are going for jobs right now, like they're actually getting asked, prompting questions, or they're getting asked, how to do something with AI. So they're coming to the job force needing to know that, and that's what's happening to students that are currently in college. They're going to need this in order. Like, to what extent they're going to need to do that, like, I'm not really sure, but the skills that they need to work with AI in order to accomplish tasks, it's happening today, and it's going to be even more relevant over the next months or even years, and it's going to even accelerate even further than that.
One of these sound bites that I find super interesting, right, is that this new workplace, right, requires that in your resume you don't build, proficient in Excel, right? But I've managed, I don't know, core rights GPTs, or able to manage 110,000 AI agents. Like, those are the type of attributes that we're going to see demonstrated on resumes, which puts the pressure on how people are being retrained and upskilled towards that. Mike, what do you think about the workforce aspect and how you experiment? How you're feeling this as the leader in the creative sector, and you manage teams as well?
So I've been seeing these corporate memos from CEOs about AI happening more frequently. It seems to be in our zeitgeist that if you're a CEO, you have to release a memo like this. And
Hey,
Have you seen Ardis? Have you seen Ardis?
have you seen mine? No, just kidding. I send one.
well, you guys are ubiquitously AI, so you don't even have to send it. Everybody knows. So the big thing I hear is that it's not about AI replacing you, but AI being your superpower, right? And let's break down that phrase. Like if you're gonna have a superpower, you know, and you're a superhero, it has to be something that's magnified, right? So if you're going to claim AI as your superpower, it's got to be magnifying something that you have a knowledge of and that you're have some specialty in. So if you're a up and coming professional, you know, you should really be deep diving into something that you're going to enhance with AI, right? Whether it's marketing knowledge, accounting knowledge, international business, education, psychology, you name it. You're gonna have to know your subject, right, in order to have a superpower that enhances it. So I really encourage that. You know, in our work in higher education and marketing, you know, you have to know things about marketing in order for AI to fundamentally enhance it. So that's where I stand on it. Like if you're gonna make it a superpower, you're gonna have something that it needs to magnify.
Yeah. I actually have a kind of an opposite kind of opinion on that, and this is something that we've seen, recently as well. But I also heard an interview with Andreessen, Mark Andreessen, and he's the one of the co-founders of Andreessen Horowitz with A16Z fund. But anyways, he was talking about like, hey, what kind of companies or what's gonna make these CEOs and companies succeed, and like what do the people need in kind of this world of AI. And the part that, like where he went, he said that look, you no longer with AI, you're going to need folks who can connect different pieces together, right? Who can make a connection and who are kind of generalists, and they know a lot about a lot of things, although they know a little about a lot of things, and they can use the AI to go deep in each individual area into those things, right? So the AI can help them with the depth. So if you think about the T-shaped individual, like when you have the top of the T, like the breadth part is something that AI is not very good at right now. So you need to know like where to look, how to put things together, how to connect things. And when traditionally you've seen leaders in the past be really good is like leaders that like can talk to investors, leaders that can talk, they can talk marketing, they can understand numbers, they can, you know what I mean? So putting all those pieces together, and like that's been very successful. I'm talking about this in the sense of leadership and kind of leading organizations and so on and so forth. But the AI now is helping those leaders do a lot more because they can go very deep and they don't need the experts, or they don't need the team of experts anymore to say, oh, okay, I understand how this connects together, but now let's evaluate, let's say, this business, or let's go deep into this marketing campaign, and I need all the experts in there. So this notion of generalist or managers of AI is something that's kind of been thinking a lot about, and it's becoming more and more, relevant. So I don't know. I don't know how that affects education, to be honest. I mean, when you look at education, it's like, first of all, we really need to redefine kind of these assessments and how we work with assessments. You really need to redefine how AI becoming kind of a collaborative tool, and then there's going to be a lot of different changes that are happening. But that is the one trend that I would say know a little about a lot of things and not go very deep into one thing.
Nicely said. Let's wrap up, and I'd like to just do it with a round robin of where we are today. So AI did not break education. Let's just be clear with that, right? What AI is doing is exposing the cracks that we already have had for centuries, right? And we can keep on coming and highlighting those. So question for us to wrap up is, if there's one thing you can change tomorrow in how schools approach AI, what would that be? Mike, we'll start with you, and then Ardis, you can close and then take us home.
So for me, it's going to be, we're probably going to have a new introductory course called My Learning Journey, and explain to students how learning happens and how they are active participants in that learning process. They're not recipients of knowledge. They are the generators of that knowledge and the generators of that learning process. So I really feel we're going to need that. And I just, I'm one of the biggest fans of higher education there is out there. I believe in its transformative power. I've been working in the field for 30 plus years, and as a teacher and as a higher education marketer, and I believe we have a bright future. So, but we're in transformation. So let's embrace it. And I'm excited to be along for the ride.
Professor McGetrick, thank you so much. Ardis, what do you got?
I like that. I like that.
I know, right? He came very professorial, right?
No. That's a really interesting idea, because it's like a reflection. Is like when you think about, like when somebody shows you, like when you go to the gym and somebody tells you, hey, you got to do this exercises, right? You got to do this, this, and this. And then this is how you, like, they give you a cheat sheet, or like they give you a program. And you're like, well, I don't really understand it, right? So it's like, if I'm feeling sore right now in my legs or whatever, it's like, what do I do next, right? It's like so how, like, understanding how your body works and how nutrition works and how the effect of your system. So like understanding the mechanism for which, like, how the system works, it's perhaps one of the best things that you can do in order to affect or to maximize your outcome around that. So what Mike's is referring to is like, understand how we learn and how we think and how our brains work in order to understand, like, hey, make your own decision if you want to use the AI, like, to just get a fast answer, or if you want to use it as a companion to do something. Or, if you spend 5 hours on social media, this is kind of the effect that it has on your brain versus not. So I like that, Mike. I think that's a really good one. I'm gonna double down on that one. Like, we need 2 of those courses.
2 of those
There we
courses,
go.
right? With that, I just wanted to say, Mike, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here.
It's been a pleasure, guys.
Ardis, you want to close the episode?
All right, friends. Mike, great having you here. JC, pleasure as always. We got to work on the pronunciations on some stuff, but it's all good.
No, man, I gotta come on. That's the mystique.
Till next time, everybody. Generation AI is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you're going to like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing weekly, and we've got a wide range of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform that's helping institutions all over the country create meaningful, personalized, and engaging connections with their prospects and students. Learn more at element451.com.